when the weakest Omega in Silverwood Academy suddenly catches the attention of the ruthless Alpha King, Lyra Ashworth goes from invisible outcast to the most dangerous target in the kingdom. As silver light begins to emanate from her skin during a deadly confrontation, everyone realizes she was never the broken wolf they thought she was. But if she's not an Omega, then what exactly has been hiding beneath her fragile exterior all along? The cafeteria doors slammed shut behind Lyra like a prison gate. Every head turned her way, and the whispers started immediately. She clutched her breakfast tray tighter, knuckles white against the plastic. "Look what crawled out of the Omega dorms." Cassandra's voice cut through the morning chatter like a blade. The beautiful blonde sat at the center table with her pack of followers, all future leaders with perfect teeth and cruel smiles. Did someone forget to tell the ghost she doesn't eat with real wolves? Laughter erupted around the room. Lyra's cheeks burned as she searched for an empty seat, but every table suddenly seemed full. Her wolf curled up inside her chest, whimpering. The animal part of her was supposed to be fierce, supposed to protect her. Instead, it felt as fragile as wet paper. "Maybe she's lost," called out Derek, a massive boy whose father led the northern pack. "The servant's entrance is that way, Omega." More laughter. Lyra's hands shook as she finally spotted an empty table in the corner, tucked behind a pillar, where the shadows gathered. She hurried toward it, trying to ignore the foot that shot out to trip her. Her tray went flying. Scrambled eggs splattered across the stone floor, orange juice spreading in a sticky puddle. The entire cafeteria fell silent, then exploded in cruel amusement. "Oops," said Marcus Vale, the boy who'd tripped her. His green eyes sparkled with fake innocence. As a future beta, he was supposed to protect the pack's weaker members. Instead, he seemed to enjoy hurting them. "These Omega types are so clumsy. Maybe you should stick to crawling." Lyra dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the scattered silverware. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of them." "That's where you belong," Cassandra purred, standing over her. "On your knees, cleaning up messes, just like your parents did before they do." "Before they what?" The new voice was quiet, but carried the weight of mountains. The cafeteria went dead silent. Even Cassandra's mouth snapped shut. Lyra looked up from the mess on the floor to see polished black boots standing beside her. Her eyes traveled upward, taking in long legs, a powerful chest, and finally, a face that made her heart stutter. Golden eyes. The mark of royalty. Prince Kirin Nightfall stood beside her, his presence filling the room like storm cloud. He was older than the other students, already graduated but still visiting the academy. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and when he looked down at her, something flickered in those dangerous golden depths. "I asked you a question," he said, his voice still soft but with an edge that made everyone step back. His gaze never left Cassandra's face. The future alpha female tried to recover her composure. "Your Highness, I was just..." "Just what? Finishing your sentence about this girl's parents?" Kirin crouched down beside Lyra, close enough that she could smell his scent. Pine forests and winter storms, power and something else she couldn't name. "Please, continue." Cassandra's face went pale. Everyone knew the royal family didn't tolerate cruelty toward pack members, but seeing it up close was different, terrifying. I didn't mean anything by it," she stammered. Kirin stood slowly, never taking his eyes off her. "Of course you didn't." His tone suggested he didn't believe a word. "Perhaps you'd like to help clean up the mess you caused?" "I didn't cause," Cassandra started, then caught herself. The prince's golden eyes had gone cold as winter wind. "No? Then who did?" The silence stretched like a held breath. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat. I accidentally tripped her, Your Highness. I'll clean it up." "How generous." Kirin's smile held no warmth. "But I think Miss Ashworth can handle it herself. After all, she's quite capable." He looked down at Lyra again, and this time his expression was different. "Interested, aren't you?" Lyra nodded, not trusting her voice. She quickly gathered the last of the silverware and stood, her legs shaking. The prince was still watching her with those strange golden eyes, as if he could see something others missed. "Good," he said simply. Then to the room, "I trust there won't be any more accidents during breakfast. Some accidents can be quite serious." His gaze swept over the watching students. "Sometimes they're even fatal." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Cassandra and her friends suddenly found their own meals very interesting. Marcus studied his hands. The other students went back to eating, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Prince Kieran started to leave, then paused beside Lyra's table. "Miss Ashworth," he said, just loud enough for her to hear, "I'd like to speak with you after your morning classes. The rose garden by the East Tower. Don't be late." Then he was gone, leaving behind only the scent of pine and storms and a cafeteria full of shocked faces. Lyra sank into her chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. Around her she could hear the whispers starting again, but they sounded different now. Confused, worried. What did the prince want with her? She was nobody. Less than nobody. Her parents had died in disgrace, and she barely had enough power to light a candle, let alone catch the attention of the future Alpha King. But his golden eyes had looked at her like she mattered, like she was worth defending. For the first time in years, her wolf lifted its head and dared to hope. The morning classes passed in a blur of worried thoughts and curious stares. News traveled fast at Silverwood Academy, and by lunchtime, everyone knew about her encounter with Prince Kieran. Some students avoided her completely, afraid of guilt by association. Others watched her with new interest, wondering what the royal family might want with a broken Omega. Lyra tried to focus on her lessons, but her mind kept drifting to those golden eyes, to the way he'd defended her without even knowing her name, to the meeting that waited for her in the rose garden. What could the prince possibly want to discuss with her? The rose garden smelled like secrets and summer rain. Lyra arrived 5 minutes early, her palms sweating, despite the cool afternoon breeze. Ancient rose bushes climbed the stone walls in riots of red and white, their thorns catching the fading sunlight like tiny daggers. She'd never been to this part of the academy grounds before. This was where the important students came to study or hold private conversations, where future pack leaders planned their strategies and made their alliances, not where Omega girls waited to meet princes. "You're punctual. I like that." Lyra spun around, her heart jumping into her throat. Prince Kieran emerged from behind a towering rosebush, moving with the fluid grace that marked all-powerful wolves. In the garden's soft light, he looked even more dangerous than he had in the cafeteria. Older, stronger, like he could tear apart armies with his bare hands. "Your Highness," she managed, dropping into an awkward curtsy. "You wanted to see me?" "I did." He gestured to a stone bench beneath a flowering arch. "Sit with me." It wasn't a request. Lyra perched on the edge of the bench, leaving as much space as possible between them. The prince settled beside her with easy confidence, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Tell me about yourself, Lyra Ashworth," he said, and her name on his lips sent strange shivers down her spine. There's not much to tell, Your Highness." "I doubt that." His golden eyes studied her face with uncomfortable intensity. "You're 17. Your parents died when you were 12, in a house fire that also destroyed most of their research. You've been living with your aunt's family ever since, and they send you here hoping education will make you useful to some pack." Lyra stared at him in shock. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know things." He leaned back against the bench, his gaze never leaving her face. "But those are just facts. They don't tell me who you are." "I'm nobody special," she said quietly. "Just an Omega who's lucky to be here at all." "Are you?" His tone was thoughtful. "In Professor Blackthorn's strategic warfare class, you scored the highest marks on the midterm exam. Higher than Cassandra, higher than Marcus, higher than students who've been training for pack leadership their entire lives." Heat flooded her cheeks. "I just study hard. You see patterns others miss," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "In Professor Moon's History of Pack Law course, your essay on Omega rights was the most sophisticated analysis she'd received in decades. You think differently than your classmates. Thinking doesn't make me strong, Lyra said, confused by his interest. I can barely shift without collapsing. My wolf is weak. I can't fight or hunt or do any of the things real wolves do. Prince Kieran was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "What do you know about your parents' research?" The question caught her off guard. They studied Omega history, ancient pack structures. My aunt says it was a waste of time, that they should have focused on more practical things. Your aunt is wrong. His voice carried absolute certainty. Your parents were brilliant researchers who discovered something that threatened very powerful people. That's why they died. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? No, that's not. It was an accident. A house fire. The investigators said what they were told to say. Prince Kieran turned to face her fully, his expression grave. Lyra, your parents weren't just studying Omega history. They found evidence that Omegas weren't always the weakest members of the pack. That centuries ago, some Omegas possessed abilities that made them incredibly powerful, abilities that certain people wanted to keep buried. Her world tilted sideways. That's impossible. Omegas have always been weak, helpless, good only for serving others? His golden eyes flashed. That's what the history books say now. But your parents found older books, hidden records that told a very different story. Lyra's hands trembled in her lap. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you inherited more than just your parents' intelligence. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather-bound journal, its cover worn smooth with age. This belonged to your mother. I've been keeping it safe, waiting for the right time to return it. With shaking fingers, Lyra took the journal. The moment it touched her skin, warmth spread up her arms. The leather felt familiar, like something from a half-remembered dream. Open it, Prince Kieran said softly. The pages were covered in her mother's careful handwriting, filled with diagrams and notes and symbols she didn't recognize. But as she looked at them, understanding began to bloom in her mind, like flowers opening to sunlight. Moon blessed, she whispered, reading from a passage that seemed to glow on the page. Omegas, who carry the ancient power of the lunar goddess. They can heal with touch, strengthen others with their presence, and, she looked up at him, eyes wide, and they're born only once every few centuries. Your test scores, your unusual insights, the way other wolves react to you, even when they don't understand why. Prince Kieran's voice was gentle but urgent. Haven't you ever wondered why you're different? Different doesn't mean special, she protested. But her voice lacked conviction. The journal in her hands thrummed with energy, and deep inside her chest, her wolf stirred for the first time in years. 3 nights ago, I had a dream, the prince continued. I saw you standing in a circle of silver light, more powerful than any alpha I've ever known. The moon goddess herself spoke your name. He leaned closer, his golden eyes burning with intensity. She told me to find you before the others do. Others? Fear crept into her voice. The same people who killed your parents. They know the old bloodlines are awakening. They're hunting down anyone who might carry moon-blessed genes. His expression darkened. They won't stop until every potential threat is eliminated. Lyra clutched the journal to her chest, her heart racing. But I'm not powerful. I can barely shift. If I were really moon-blessed, wouldn't I know it by now? Power that strong doesn't appear overnight. It grows slowly, hidden, until the moment it's needed most. Prince Kieran stood up, pacing to the rose-covered wall. Your parents suspected what you might become. That's why they were researching Omega abilities so intensively in the months before they died. How do you know all this? He turned back to her, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression for the first time. Because I've been having the dreams for 3 years, ever since my wolf chose you as my mate. The words hung between them like lightning in the air. Lyra stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You're... what? I know how it sounds. A prince and an Omega. It's impossible according to current pack law. But wolves don't lie about mate bonds. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "From the moment I first caught your scent, my wolf has recognized you as mine. The question is..." He took a step closer, his golden eyes searching her face. "What does your wolf tell you about me?" Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Deep inside her, her silver wolf finally lifted its head and looked at the magnificent creature standing before them. Recognition flooded through her like warm honey, followed immediately by terror. Because her wolf didn't just recognize him as mate material, it saw him as home. But if Prince Kieran was right about her parents, about the danger hunting her, about the power sleeping in her bloodline, then loving him might be the most dangerous thing she'd ever do. The crystal ball in Headmaster Ravencroft's office exploded without warning, sending rainbow shards across his ancient desk. Lyra jerked backward as purple smoke poured from the broken pieces, forming letters in the air that made her heart stop beating. "The moon blessed awakens." "Impossible," the headmaster whispered, his face turning white as winter snow. He grabbed Lyra's shoulders with shaking hands. "Child, where did you get that pendant?" Lyra's fingers flew to her throat, touching the silver wolf necklace Prince Kieran had given her just 3 days ago. The metal felt warm, almost alive under her fingertips. "The prince gave it to me, sir. He said it belonged to his grandmother." Ravencroft's eyes went wide with terror and wonder. Queen Celine's moonstone. But that means... He stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of old books. "You're not just any Omega, are you? The signs were always there. Your strange test scores, the way other wolves react to you, that silvery scent that appears and disappears." Before Lyra could ask what he meant, the office door burst open. Marcus Vale stormed in, his beta energy crackling around him like lightning. Behind him came his father, Lord Commander Vale, whose scarred face showed years of battles won and lost. "Headmaster," Lord Vale's voice cut through the room like a sword. "We need to discuss the Ashworth girl. There have been developments." Lyra's stomach dropped to her shoes. Whatever this was about, it couldn't be good news. "What kind of developments?" Ravencroft asked, moving to stand protectively in front of Lyra. Marcus pulled out a golden communication device that pulsed with magical energy. 3 packs from the Northern Territories sent emergency messages this morning. They all report the same thing. Their Omega Pack members have been acting strange since yesterday. Restless, agitated, like they're waiting for something to happen. Lord Vale stepped forward, his gray eyes fixed on Lyra, like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. "It started exactly when Prince Kieran gave her that necklace. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence." "You think I'm causing this?" Lyra's voice came out smaller than she wanted. Her wolf stirred uneasily in her chest, sensing danger from all directions. "I think you're more than you appear to be," Lord Vale replied. His hand rested on the sword at his hip. "And that makes you either our kingdom's greatest hope or its most terrible threat." Ravencroft moved closer to Lyra, his protective instincts flaring. "She's just a student, Commander. A bright one, yes, but still learning to control her abilities. Bright enough to score higher than Alpha heirs on every strategic exam," Marcus interrupted, jealousy dripping from his words. "Bright enough to catch a prince's attention when she should be invisible. Bright enough to make every Omega in 3 territories start acting like they're preparing for war." The pendant against Lyra's chest grew warmer, and she could swear she heard something like distant howling in her mind. Not threatening, but calling. Like wolves across the kingdom were trying to reach her through some invisible connection she didn't understand. "There's something else," Lord Vale continued, pulling out a rolled parchment sealed with black wax. "We intercepted communications between rogue wolf groups. They're planning something big, and they mentioned the false Omega specifically." Lyra's blood turned to ice water. "False Omega? What does that mean?" "It means someone knows what you really are," Ravencroft said quietly, "and they're planning to use that knowledge against you." Marcus stepped closer, his face twisted with confusion and anger. "What is she really? Because I've been watching her for months, and nothing adds up. She smells like Omega, acts like Omega, but there's something underneath that doesn't fit. Before anyone could answer, the air in the room suddenly filled with the sound of beating wings. A massive raven landed on the windowsill, carrying a message tube marked with the royal seal, its black eyes fixed on Lyra with unsettling intelligence. Ravencroft took the message with trembling hands. As he read, his face went through several expressions: surprise, fear, and finally something that looked like acceptance of fate. "What does it say?" Lyra whispered. "Prince Kieran requests your immediate presence in the royal library. He says it's about your family history, and that you have the right to know the truth about what happened to your parents." Lord Vale and Marcus exchanged meaningful looks. "Convenient timing," the commander muttered. "Right when we discover she might not be what she seems." "Or maybe the prince knows exactly what she is," Marcus suggested darkly. "Maybe this has all been planned from the beginning." Lyra's mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. Her parents had died in what everyone called an accident, but she'd always suspected there was more to the story. The way people stopped talking when she entered rooms, the pitying looks, the whispered conversations that ended abruptly when they noticed her listening. "I have to go," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. "Whatever the truth is, I need to hear it." "It could be a trap," Marcus warned, though his tone suggested he might not mind if it was. "Or it could be the answers I've been searching for my whole life," Lyra replied. She looked at each of them in turn: the headmaster who'd always believed in her, the commander who saw her as a threat, the beta who couldn't decide if he hated or feared her. "Either way, hiding won't change what I am or what's coming." She walked toward the door, her heart pounding like thunder in her chest. Behind her, she heard Lord Vale say to Ravencroft, "Keep watch on the other Omega students. If she really is what I think she is, they'll all feel it when her power awakens. And when that happens, every pack in the kingdom will have to choose a side." As Lyra stepped into the hallway, the pendant around her neck pulsed once, sending warmth through her entire body. For just a moment, she could swear she heard the voices of wolves she'd never met, calling her name across impossible distances. Whatever she was about to learn in the royal library, one thing was becoming clear: her quiet life as an ignored Omega was about to end forever. The only question was whether she'd survive what came next. The royal library's doors stood 12 feet tall and carved with images of wolves running beneath stars. But what made Lyra stop breathing was the silence that greeted her when she stepped inside. Not the peaceful quiet of a place filled with books, but the heavy silence that comes before storms break and change everything forever. Prince Kieran sat at a table covered with old papers, maps, and books, so ancient their pages looked ready to crumble into dust. When he looked up at her, his golden eyes held a sadness that made her stomach twist with worry. "Lyra," he said softly, standing as she approached. "Thank you for coming. I know this must be confusing. Everyone keeps saying I'm not what I seem," she said, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "But no one will tell me what that means. I just want to understand what's happening to me." Kieran gestured for her to sit beside him. On the table, she could see photographs of wolves she didn't recognize, family trees with names crossed out in red ink, and what looked like official documents bearing royal seals. "Your parents," he began carefully, "didn't die in an accident. They were murdered because of what they discovered about you." The words hit her like physical blows. Lyra gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. "Murdered? But everyone said it was a fire, that their house just—" "The fire was set to cover up what really happened," Kieran interrupted gently. "They found out that you weren't just their daughter. You were adopted, Lyra, and your real parents were the last of the moon-blessed bloodline." Moon-blessed? The term felt familiar, like something from half-remembered dreams. What does that mean? Before Kieran could answer, a new voice spoke from the shadows between the tall bookshelves. "It means you're the most powerful Omega who will ever live, and the most dangerous." A figure stepped into the light, an elderly woman with silver hair and eyes, that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. She wore simple clothes, but power radiated from her like heat from a fire. "Grandmother Luna," Kieran said, standing respectfully, "I thought you were still traveling in the Eastern Kingdoms." "I came as soon as the signs began appearing," Luna replied, her attention focused entirely on Lyra. "Child, do you know what happens to normal omegas during the full moon?" Lyra nodded slowly. "They become more emotional, more connected to their pack bonds. Some get stronger, but not by much." "And what happens to you?" The question made Lyra think back to all those nights when she'd felt restless and strange, when her wolf had stirred with energies she couldn't understand. I get dreams. Visions of wolves I've never met, calling for help. Sometimes I wake up and my room is filled with silver light, but it always fades before anyone can see it." Luna and Kieran exchanged looks that confirmed her worst fears. She really was different, and that difference had already cost her parents their lives. "The moon-blessed appear once every few centuries," Luna explained, settling into a chair across from them. "They have the power to heal wounded wolves, to strengthen weak pack bonds, and to unite different packs under common purpose. But they also have another ability, one that terrifies those who want to keep wolves divided and weak." "What ability?" Lyra whispered. "You can break false bonds," Kieran said quietly. "Forced matings, corrupt pack leadership, artificial hierarchies, maintained through fear and manipulation. Your power can set wolves free to choose their own destinies." The implications hit Lyra like lightning. If she could break forced bonds, that meant she threatened everyone who maintained power through control over others. Every corrupt alpha, every abusive pack leader, every arrangement made for political gain rather than genuine connection. "That's why they killed your adoptive parents," Luna continued. "Robert and Sarah Ashworth discovered your true heritage when your powers began manifesting early. They tried to find others who could help protect you, but someone betrayed them to those who profit from keeping wolves oppressed." A door slammed somewhere in the library, followed by the sound of multiple footsteps approaching fast. Kieran immediately moved to stand between Lyra and whatever was coming, his hand going to the knife at his belt. "Someone followed you," he said grimly. Marcus Vale appeared first, flanked by 3 other beta wolves she recognized from advanced combat classes. Their faces showed determination and something that looked like fear. "Step away from her, Your Highness," Marcus called out, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. "For your own safety and the safety of the kingdom." "What is this about, Marcus?" Kieran demanded, though he didn't move from his protective position. "We know what she is now," one of the other betas answered. "A girl named Stella whose family controlled major trade routes. Lord Commander Vale sent word to the other noble families. A moon blessed could destroy everything we've built." Luna laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Everything you've stolen, you mean? Every forced mating, every pack absorbed through intimidation, every omega treated like property instead of a person." "The system works," Marcus shot back. "It keeps order, maintains peace, ensures the strongest lead, and the weakest are protected. It ensures you stay in power while others suffer," Lyra said, standing up despite her fear. Around her, the air began to shimmer with faint silver light. "I've seen how your protection works, Marcus. I've lived it." The pendant at her throat grew warm, and suddenly she could sense every wolf in the building. She felt their emotions, their fears, their hidden pain. The knowledge hit her like a tsunami. So many wolves living lives that didn't fit their true natures, bound by expectations and traditions that served only those at the top. "You're all so afraid," she whispered, looking at Marcus and his companions with new understanding. "You're terrified that if wolves were free to choose, they might not choose you." "That's enough," Stella snarled, starting forward. "We're taking you into protective custody until the council can decide what to do with you." "Over my dead body," Kieran growled, shifting partially into his wolf form. His canine teeth extended and his eyes blazed with golden fire. But before anyone could make a move, the library doors burst open again. This time it was Headmaster Ravencroft, running faster than Lyra had ever seen him move. "Everyone stop!" he shouted. "The Northern Territories are under attack!" Rogue wolves, hundreds of them, moving toward the capital. They're demanding the surrender of the false Omega, or they'll burn everything in their path. The room fell silent except for the sound of heavy breathing. Lyra felt the weight of everyone's stares, the pressure of choices that would affect thousands of lives. "How long do we have?" Luna asked quietly. "They'll reach the city walls by sunset tomorrow," Ravencroft replied. "Maybe less if they don't stop to rest." Lyra looked around at the faces surrounding her, allies and enemies alike, united in their fear of what was coming. In less than 24 hours, people would die because of what she was. The only question was how many, and whether she'd have the courage to face what was coming for her. A scream tore through the night air, making Lyra bolt upright in her narrow dorm bed. Outside her window, orange flames licked at the darkness like hungry tongues. The Omega dormitory was on fire, and she was trapped on the 3rd floor with nowhere to run. "Help us!" voices cried from the floors below. Thick smoke poured under her door, stinging her eyes and burning her throat. Her wolf whimpered in terror, sensing something terribly wrong about this fire. It smelled like magic, dark and twisted. Lyra grabbed her silver pendant and pressed it to her lips, thinking of Kieran. Where was he? The royal quarters were on the other side of campus. By the time anyone reached them, she and dozens of other Omegas would be nothing but ash. The wooden floor beneath her feet grew hot. Time was running out. Suddenly, her door exploded inward. Through the smoke stepped Marcus, his green eyes gleaming with something that wasn't quite rescue. "Well, well, the prince's little pet is about to become barbecue." "Marcus?" Lyra backed toward the window, confusion mixing with fear. "What are you doing here? How did you get through the fire?" He laughed, and the sound made her skin crawl. "I started it, you stupid girl. Did you really think I'd let some weak Omega steal everything that should be mine?" Horror crashed over her like ice water. "You set the dormitory on fire? There are innocent wolves in here." "Innocent?" Marcus stepped closer, and now she could see the rage twisting his handsome features. "There's nothing innocent about what you've done. You've made the future Alpha King look like a fool, chasing after damaged goods, when he could have any strong she-wolf in the kingdom." The building groaned around them. Somewhere below, a ceiling collapsed with a thunderous crash. More screams echoed through the night. "This is insane!" Lyra pressed against the glass, feeling the heat of the flames behind her. "Kieran will never forgive you for this." "Kieran won't know it was me." Marcus pulled something from his pocket, a small crystal that pulsed with sickly green light. "Magic leaves no evidence when it's done right. Everyone will think it was an accident. A tragic fire that took the life of one confused Omega who thought she could rise above her station." The crystal grew brighter, and Lyra felt power radiating from it, like poison. This wasn't just beta strength. Someone had given Marcus access to forbidden magic. "Who's helping you?" she demanded, though her voice shook with terror. Marcus smiled, showing too many teeth. "Let's just say there are wolves in this kingdom who believe in the old ways. Wolves who think alphas should mate with alphas, and omegas should know their place." He raised the crystal, and green fire sparked from its surface. "Nothing personal, Lyra. You're just in the way of progress." But before he could strike, the window behind her shattered. A massive black wolf landed in the room with deadly grace, golden eyes blazing with fury. Kieran had arrived, and he was magnificent in his rage. Marcus stumbled backward, the crystal falling from his shocked fingers. "How did you? The fire should have kept you busy." Kieran shifted back to human form, his naked chest heaving with controlled violence. "Did you really think I wouldn't sense my mate in danger?" His voice was deadly quiet, more terrifying than any roar. "Did you think I wouldn't smell your treachery the moment it began?" "She's not your mate," Marcus snarled, desperation making his voice crack. "She's nothing. A broken Omega who will make you weak." The only thing that makes me weak, Kieran said, stepping protectively in front of Lyra, is the thought of losing her. Marcus lunged for the fallen crystal, but Kieran was faster. The future Alpha King's fist connected with Marcus's jaw, sending the Beta heir crashing into the burning wall. The impact knocked him unconscious, and suddenly the magical flames began to die. "We need to get out of here," Kieran said, turning to Lyra. "The regular fire is still spreading." But as he reached for her, Lyra gasped. The silver pendant around her neck had begun to glow, pulsing in rhythm with her racing heart. Warmth spread through her chest, different from the heat of the flames. This felt like moonlight and starshine and something ancient stirring to life. "Kieran," she whispered, staring at her hands as silver light began to dance across her skin. "Something's happening to me." He followed her gaze and went very still. "Lyra, your eyes." She turned toward a broken piece of mirror on the floor and saw her reflection. Her usual brown eyes had turned silver, bright as the full moon. The weak scent that had always marked her as a lesser Omega was changing too, becoming something powerful and strange. "What's wrong with me?" Fear crept into her voice, but it was a different kind of fear now. Not of dying, but of becoming something she didn't understand. Kieran's expression shifted from concern to wonder. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. You're awakening." Awakening to what? Before he could answer, the building shuddered again. They were running out of time. "Tell me later," Lyra said, making a decision that surprised them both. "Right now, we save everyone else." She stepped toward the flames, blocking their exit, and something incredible happened. The fire parted before her like water, creating a path of cool air. Her silver light pushed back the smoke, making it safe to breathe. Kieran's eyes widened with amazement and something that looked like pride. "After you, my queen." Together, they ran through the burning dormitory, Lyra's strange new power clearing their way. They rescued Omega after Omega, leading them to safety through corridors that should have been impossible to navigate. With each wolf they saved, Lyra felt her strength growing. But the most shocking moment came when they reached the first floor. Professor Blackthorn stood in the courtyard, directing the rescue efforts with calm efficiency. When he saw Lyra emerge wreathed in silver light, his stern face broke into the first smile she'd ever seen from him. "Well done, Miss Ashworth," he said quietly, as if students glowed with mysterious power every day. "I was wondering when you'd finally figure it out." "Figure what out?" she demanded. But he was already turning away to help the other survivors. As dawn broke over Silverwood Academy, Lyra stood surrounded by the Omegas she'd saved. They looked at her with something she'd never seen before in their eyes, not pity or dismissal, but respect, even gratitude. Marcus had been taken away by the royal guard, still unconscious, and stripped of his magical crystal. The Beta heir who'd terrorized her for years suddenly looked small and pathetic in chains. But Lyra's mind wasn't on revenge. It was on the silver light that still flickered beneath her skin, on Kieran's proud smile, on Professor Blackthorn's knowing look. She was changing into something new, something powerful. The question was, what exactly was she becoming? "You have got to be kidding me." Cassandra's voice cut through the morning air like a blade, sharp with disbelief and rage. 3 days after the fire, Lyra sat in the Academy's main courtyard, surrounded by a circle of Omega students who hung on her every word. She was teaching them basic self-defense moves, showing them how to use their smaller size as an advantage rather than a weakness. For the first time in her life, she felt like a leader. But Cassandra's arrival shattered the peaceful moment like glass. "Look at this," the alpha female sneered, her perfect blonde hair catching the sunlight as she approached with her usual pack of followers. "The charity case is playing teacher now." Lyra stood slowly, feeling her wolf stir beneath her skin. The silver pendant at her throat grew warm, and she noticed several of the Omegas behind her straightening with new confidence. Something had changed since the fire, and everyone could sense it. "We were just finishing up," Lyra said calmly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "You're welcome to join us if you'd like to learn something useful." Cassandra laughed, but there was an edge of hysteria in the sound. Learn from you? You're still the same pathetic nobody you always were. That little light show during the fire doesn't change anything. Doesn't it? The voice belonged to Devon, one of the Omega boys who'd been too scared to speak up before. Now he stood beside Lyra, chin raised defiantly. She saved our lives while you were safe in the Alpha Wing, doing nothing. More Omegas joined him, forming a protective circle around Lyra. For the first time in Silverwood's history, the lowest-ranked students were standing up to their tormentors. Cassandra's face went red with fury. How dare you speak to me like that? I could have you expelled? For what? Lyra stepped forward, silver eyes flashing. For telling the truth? The confrontation was spiraling out of control, drawing attention from across the courtyard. Other students stopped their conversations to watch, sensing drama in the air like wolves scenting blood. That's when Kieran arrived. The future Alpha King moved through the crowd like a force of nature, his presence making everyone step aside instinctively. But instead of heading straight for Lyra as usual, he paused to speak with Professor Blackthorn, who had appeared from seemingly nowhere. Their whispered conversation was too quiet for normal hearing, but Lyra's enhanced senses caught fragments that made no sense. Bloodline confirmed. The council must be told. Dangerous if she doesn't learn control. What bloodline? What council? And why did everyone keep acting like they knew something she didn't? Your boyfriend's here, Cassandra said, venom dripping from every word. Maybe he can explain why he's wasting time with damaged goods. Before Lyra could respond, a new scent hit her nose, one that made her wolf recoil with instinctive fear. It was the smell of old magic, ancient and powerful, and definitely not friendly. The temperature around them dropped 10 degrees in an instant. From the shadow of the Academy's bell tower stepped 3 figures in dark hooded robes. Their faces were hidden, but power radiated from them, like heat from a forge. Students throughout the courtyard began backing away, whimpering with sudden terror. Kieran, Lyra whispered, fear crawling up her spine like ice. But the future Alpha King was already moving, his golden eyes hard, with recognition and rage. Shadow Council, he growled, loud enough for everyone to hear. You have no authority here. The center figure pushed back her hood, revealing a woman with silver hair and eyes like black ice. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. We have authority wherever moon-blessed hide from their destiny, young prince. The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. Moon-blessed. The same term Marcus had used during his terrified rambling before they'd taken him away. What did it mean? She's not hiding, Kieran snarled, moving to stand between Lyra and the mysterious strangers. She's learning. The woman's laugh was like wind through a graveyard. Learning? Child, she doesn't even know what she is. Look at her, confused and frightened, like a pup separated from its pack. Against her will, Lyra felt tears prick her eyes. The woman was right. She was confused and frightened, and tired of being the only one who didn't understand what was happening to her. Then tell me, she said, stepping around Kieran despite his protective stance. Tell me what I am. The Shadow Council member smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp. You are the first moon-blessed born in 300 years. Your bloodline was thought extinct, destroyed by those who feared your power. Gasps echoed around the courtyard. Even Cassandra had gone pale, her earlier bravado forgotten. My power? Lyra's voice came out smaller than she intended. The ability to heal the sick, strengthen the weak, and purify corruption with moonlight itself. The woman's eyes glittered with something that might have been hunger. You are meant to serve as a bridge between the human world and the ancient magic that once flowed freely through our kind. It sounded beautiful. It sounded terrifying. What do you want with her? Kieran demanded, his wolf pressing close to the surface. We want to take her home, said the second council member, pushing back his own hood to reveal a face marked with ritual scars. To train her properly, away from the distractions of modern pack politics. No. The word burst from Lyra's lips before she could stop it. "This is my home. These are my people. These people have spent years treating you like garbage," the woman pointed out with cruel accuracy. "Why would you want to stay?" Lyra looked around the courtyard at the Omegas, who'd found new courage in her presence, at Professor Blackthorn's worried face, at Kieran's fierce protectiveness, even at Cassandra, whose bullying had pushed Lyra to become stronger. "Because running away won't help anyone," she said finally. "If I really have this power, then I should use it here, where it's needed." The Shadow Council members exchanged glances that spoke of communication beyond words. "Very well," the woman said. "But know this, child power like yours draws enemies. The fire was just the beginning. There are those who will do anything to see you dead before you can fulfill your potential." With that ominous warning, they melted back into the shadows as suddenly as they'd appeared, leaving behind only the lingering scent of old magic and older threats. The courtyard erupted in excited chatter, but Lyra barely heard it. Her mind was spinning with revelation and fear in equal measure. "Hey!" Kieran's gentle voice drew her attention. "Are you okay?" She looked up at him, this prince who'd chosen her, when everyone else had turned away, and felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty, exactly, but determination. "Ask me again tomorrow," she said with a shaky smile, "after I figure out what being moon-blessed actually means." But even as she spoke, she could feel eyes watching her from the shadows. The Shadow Council had been right about one thing: enemies were coming. The only question was whether she'd be ready for them. The ground shook as Lyra's scream tore through the night air. Every wolf in the ceremonial circle dropped to their knees, including the powerful Alpha King himself. But this wasn't the weak cry they expected from a broken Omega. This was something that made their very souls tremble. Silver fire exploded from Lyra's body like lightning striking the earth. The metal pendant around her neck glowed so bright it looked like a tiny sun. Her brown hair turned white as snow, and her usually dull eyes now blazed with the color of moonbeams. The rogues who had been advancing on Kieran suddenly stumbled backward, whimpering like scared puppies. "What is she?" someone screamed from the crowd. Marcus, still in his bronze wolf form, tried to run, but found his paws frozen to the ground. The silver light wrapped around him like invisible chains. When he shifted back to human shape, his face was pale with terror. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Moon-blessed wolves died out 300 years ago." Lyra rose into the air, her feet no longer touching the ceremonial stones. Her voice came out different now, deeper, older, carrying the weight of ancient magic. "We didn't die out, Marcus. We were just sleeping, waiting for the right time to wake up." The injured Kieran struggled to his feet, blood running down his ribs from the rogue's claws. But his golden eyes held no fear, only wonder and fierce pride. Even wounded, he looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "You knew," Lyra said, turning to face him. "It wasn't a question. My grandmother told me stories," he admitted, his voice rough with pain and emotion. "About wolves blessed by the moon goddess herself. Wolves who could heal the sick, strengthen the weak, and—" he paused, looking at the cowering rogues, "turn darkness back into light." Professor Blackthorn stepped forward from the crowd, his usually stern face soft with amazement. "The old texts speak of moon-blessed wolves. They say when one awakens, it means the kingdom faces its greatest darkness, but also its greatest hope for change." Lyra slowly lowered herself back to the ground. The silver fire around her body dimmed, but didn't disappear completely. She looked at all the nobles who had ignored her, all the students who had laughed at her weakness, all the professors who had written her off as hopeless. "For years, you told me I was nothing," she said, her new voice carrying across the silent courtyard. "You said I was too weak to matter, too broken to belong here." She gestured to the cowering rogues. "But weakness isn't always what it seems, is it?" Lady Cassandra, who had spent months making Lyra's life miserable, fell to her knees. "Your Majesty, we didn't know." Of course you didn't know, Lyra replied. But her tone wasn't angry, it was sad. Because you never bothered to look beyond what you wanted to see. The silver light pulsed outward, like ripples on a pond. Where it touched the wounded wolves, both friend and enemy, their injuries began to heal. Marcus watched in shock as the claw marks on his arm disappeared completely. I could punish you all, Lyra continued, walking slowly around the circle. The old laws would give me that right. But punishment won't change hearts. It won't make you understand that strength comes in many different forms. She stopped in front of Marcus, who was now trembling so hard he could barely stand. You wanted to kill me because you thought I was weak. But tell me, Marcus, which one of us is standing strong right now? Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. Yes, you were, Lyra agreed. But being wrong doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of a better one, if you choose it to be. The silver light began to fade, but Lyra's white hair and glowing eyes remained. She was no longer the scared girl who had hidden in shadows. This was someone entirely new, yet still completely herself. Kieran limped over to her side, and she immediately placed her hand on his wounds. Silver light flowed from her fingers, and his injuries healed instantly. Are you okay? She asked, her voice now carrying both power and tenderness. I'm perfect, he said, taking her face in his hands. You're perfect. You've always been perfect. I just had to wait for you to see it too. The crowd watched in amazement as their future king kissed their new queen under the light of the full moon. But this wasn't just about romance. This was about a kingdom that was about to change forever. What happens now? Professor Blackthorne asked, his voice filled with awe. Lyra turned to address everyone gathered there, students, teachers, nobles, and even the defeated rogues. Now we build something better. A kingdom where strength is measured not by who you can defeat, but by who you choose to protect. Where omegas are valued for their minds, not dismissed for their size. Where being different isn't a weakness, it's a gift. The silver pendant around her neck pulsed once more, and every wolf present felt something shift inside them. Not their bodies, their hearts. Years of prejudice began to crack like ice in spring sunlight. But even as hope filled the air, Lyra noticed something troubling. In the shadows beyond the ceremonial circle, red eyes gleamed with anger. The rogue attack had failed, but whoever had sent them was still out there, still planning, still dangerous. The real battle for the kingdom's future was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the night everything changed, and Queen Lyra Nightfall stood in the royal garden, watching Omega children play without fear. Their laughter filled the morning air like music, a sound that would have been impossible in the old kingdom. Still hard to believe sometimes, isn't it? Kieran's voice came from behind her as he wrapped his arms around her waist. His scent, pine and rain, and something uniquely him, always made her wolf purr with contentment. Which part? Lyra smiled, leaning back against his chest. That I'm queen, or that those children don't have to hide who they are anymore? Both, he admitted, pressing a kiss to her temple. Though I think you were always meant to be queen. The crown just made it official. Lyra touched the silver and gold crown resting on her white hair. It was lighter than she'd expected when they first placed it on her head, but the responsibility that came with it weighed more than any metal ever could. The sound of footsteps on the stone path made them both turn. Marcus approached slowly, dirt under his fingernails from his morning work in the castle gardens. His punishment wasn't imprisonment or death. It was service, learning humility through honest labor. Your Majesties, he said, bowing low. The arrogance that had once defined him was completely gone. The new dormitory for Omega students is finished. Professor Blackthorne asked me to tell you it's ready for inspection. Lyra studied his face carefully. The Marcus, who had tried to kill her 6 months ago, was gone, replaced by someone who genuinely seemed to understand the pain he had caused. How do you feel about Omega students having their own space? She asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I think I spent so long believing that being strong meant making others feel weak. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. He looked up at her with sincere eyes. The Omega students deserve to feel safe and proud of who they are. Everyone does. Good answer, Kieran said, though his voice still held a note of caution. Trust, once broken, took time to rebuild. There's something else, Marcus continued, his expression growing worried. While I was working in the East Gardens, I found these. He pulled out 3 black feathers from his pocket. They weren't there yesterday, and they don't match any bird native to our lands. Lyra's blood ran cold as she recognized the feathers. They were identical to the ones the rogues had worn as battle markers. Someone's still out there, she whispered. The Crimson Fang Rebellion didn't die with the attack, Kieran agreed, his jaw tightening. They're regrouping, planning something new. But instead of fear, Lyra felt determination rise in her chest. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified by this news. Now, she was the moon-blessed queen of the strongest kingdom in the realm. She had work to do. Let them come, she said firmly. This kingdom is no longer what it was. We're stronger now, more united. She was right. In just 6 months, everything had changed. The new Omega dormitories weren't places of shame, but pride. Students who had once hidden their true natures now walked tall through the halls. Professors taught classes on Omega leadership alongside traditional Alpha strategy. Lady Cassandra, who had once led the campaign to make Lyra's life miserable, now ran the new mentorship program, pairing older students with younger Omegas. It turned out that beneath all her cruelty had been a deep fear of her own perceived weaknesses. I have an idea, Lyra said suddenly, her silver eyes lighting up with inspiration. Marcus, would you be willing to help with something important? Marcus straightened, hope flickering across his face. Anything, Your Majesty. I want you to help train our security forces. You know how the rebels think, how they operate. Your knowledge could save lives. Kieran raised an eyebrow. Are you sure about this? People can change, Lyra replied, looking directly at Marcus. But only if we give them the chance to prove it. Marcus dropped to one knee right there in the garden, tears streaming down his face. I won't let you down. I swear on my life, I will spend every day trying to make up for what I did. Good, Lyra said simply, because this kingdom needs every strong wolf it can get, and strength comes in many different forms. As if summoned by her words, Professor Blackthorn appeared on the garden path, practically glowing with excitement. Your Majesty, we've received word from the Northern Territories. 3 more moon-blessed wolves have awakened. They're requesting permission to come study here. Lyra's heart soared. She wasn't alone anymore. There were others like her, others who had been sleeping until the world was ready for their light. Send word immediately, she commanded. Tell them Silverwood Academy welcomes all wolves who wish to learn and grow. But even as joy filled her heart, Lyra remained alert. The black feathers were a reminder that darkness still lurked beyond their borders. The rebels who had tried to kill her were still out there, likely planning something even more dangerous. What do you think they'll try next? Kieran asked, as if reading her thoughts. I don't know, Lyra admitted. But whatever it is, we'll face it together. All of us. Alpha, Beta, and Omega. The old divisions that made us weak are gone. Now, we're truly one pack. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, painting the garden in shades of gold and green, Queen Lyra felt a deep sense of peace settle in her bones. The scared, broken girl who had once pressed herself against stone walls to avoid notice was gone. In her place stood a leader, ready to protect her people, her kingdom, and the new world they were building together. The silver pendant still hung around her neck, now joined by the golden crown, symbols of a journey from shadow to light, from despair to hope, from weakness to strength. And somewhere in the distance, carried on the morning wind, came the sound of young voices raised in song, Omega children, who would never have to hide who they were, growing up in a world where being different was finally seen as the gift it had always been. The revolution was far from over. But for the first time in her life, Queen Lyra Nightfall faced the future without fear.